So I'm going to talk a little bit first about recent history around sexual harassment in Britain. Louise is going to do it in the United States. We're going to go back and forth, then we'll do some talking together, then we'll do some theory, then we'll do some talking together again. In 1985, and probably because Louise had left and gone back to America, I got involved in starting an organization with some women called Women Against Sexual Harassment, WASH. And it provided legal and counseling services to women who were being harassed at work. And people thought we were a bit mad for doing it, but we took it to the Trade Union Council and we created a report, and it was published by what would now be called Liberty with NCCL. And that was kind of it. The next thing that I know on the horizon was that in 2013, you might remember that the government introduced tribunal fees if you wanted to bring a complaint. And this was a way to stop workers' rights and workers complaining about the violation of their rights. But one of the unintended consequences, there were many intended consequences, but one of the unintended consequences that sex discrimination cases dropped by 70% because women simply couldn't afford to talk about being harassed. A little bit later, the government scrapped the legal requirement for employers to protect workers from abuse by third parties, such as clients or customers. So again, that was the taking away of protections for women against sexual harassment. And eventually the Supreme Court, which only came in a few years ago, it's hard to think of that, challenged the government and forced them to drop the tribunal fee so that women actually, and other workers, could take their employers to court or to the tribunal. And in 2014, the government, fighting once again, dropped the questionnaire which allowed sexual harassment claimants to ask about those things. So it's a back and forth tug to even get this on the agenda. So it's a very checkered and a long history, both in our day and in the past, long before us. Now, interestingly, and I think, Sissy, we're both thinking on the same lines here, second wave feminism, which erupted with a passion in the 1970s, creating gender studies programs and examination of every discipline from evolutionary theory to chemistry to housing policy to psychoanalysis to how women were looked at and seen and represented. And it created a sort of circumstances and a struggle for women to speak up, or to dare to speak up is what I should say, to dare to have a mind, to change the conditions of work and parenting, of the healthcare system, including mental health, of the education system, even how many girls passed, how the marks were divided, of who child support was paid to, because it used to be paid to the men, who could get a mortgage, used to be paid, all of those kinds of issues, to abortion rights, to who was doing the emotional labor, and it focused on many cultural and legislative changes. And that's very, very recent history. Some of these focused on women's bodies and some on women's minds. And when the backlash came, which it did with a vengeance, you could think of the backlash starting with Thatcher. You could think of the Victoria Beckham's band, the Spice Girls. You could think of them as part of the backlash rather than part of the forward flash, because it was all about girl power in a way that was completely different than anything that we thought of. New forms of assault, such as the highly pornographic and paedophilic representations of girls' bodies in vogue, went from the top shelf to the mass media and to mass culture. So as teachers and parents and mentors were attempting to grow girls' minds, their bodies were being targeted with a size zero, to shrinking ourselves with ever-increasing sexualized images of femininity, from Robert Thicke to today's videos. So we, thinking about this, Louise and I, were thinking that Me Too is the struggle for women to have bodies, to have a sexuality, to have a yes, and to have a no.
Where are we?
You need the next slide.
Yes, please. Okay, I'm going to take you rather quickly through the U.S. history because, we don't need to spend time on it. But clearly, because of the last year or so in the U.S., the Harvey Weinstein sort of, volcanic eruption, I do want to set it in the context and take you through it. So all the way from 1991 to June of 2018. In 1991, Anita Hill accused the then Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment. There was tremendous questioning of her experience. She was really being challenged. She was held up and sort of crucified for making that claim. However, and this is unlike, interestingly, what you just said about what happened in Britain, 1 year after Anita Hill testified at her sexual harassment complaints, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission received 50% more claims against sexual harassment, so it increased tremendously. And then in 1973, the US government outlawed sexual discrimination in something called Title IX, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of sex in any educational institution that was federally funded. But they didn't necessarily monitor those claims or oversee them. So it's continued to be very difficult for young women, for students to make those claims, even once Title IX was sort of in place. Go all the way to 2011 and the Obama administration, and Obama and Joseph Biden made a new claim, which was then called it's referred to as the Dear Colleague letter. And it was actually issued by the Office of Civil Rights. And it told the more than 7,000 colleges and universities that were receiving federal funding that they had to protect the accusers, as they were called, more adequately. And what that meant was they discouraged cross-examination of these mostly young women students, right? Because obviously we all know that really holds someone back. You're told you're going to make this claim, but you're really going to be put through it. And so they tried to put in some guidelines to protect these young women, and also that something else which was very important, which hadn't been a part of this before 2011, was that they could appeal not guilty findings, right? So before that, they had Title IX. But there were so many cases in which these claims were just dismissed, not guilty. The perpetrators were protected, and Obama really did try to address and turn that around a bit. Now we go to Me Too. In October of 2017, the actress Alyssa Milano, who actually says, and has now talked many times publicly about the fact that she was unaware that the Me Too phrase had already been coined by Tarana Burke, who is a Black Lives Matter activist, in 2006. She didn't know that Tarana Burke sort of called it Me Too. But when Alyssa Milano put up a tweet asking women if they had experienced sexual harassment, more than 66,000 users replied within something like 2 days. So there it begins. Between October of 2017 and May of 2018, and now, I'm sure this number would be increased today on June, whatever this is, there were 122 prominent men. So we're not talking about just all of the different men that have been, employees who have, been stood up to. But this was the prominent men have been accused of sexual harassment. And Time Magazine, which does a Person of the Year, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with this, but this year they actually did it. Named the person, which was not one person, but the Silence Breakers. And they did a whole spread on many women who have come forward and spoken up. Time's Up, which is, I don't know again if people are familiar with, but there's Me Too and Time's Up movements. And those were mostly started by Hollywood women, very affluent women who wanted to start a fund to support women of lesser means to be able to take up sexual harassment cases. And they, where are we? They raised $21 million in 2 months. And the National Women's Law Center is representing, you know, I think at this point it's literally thousands of women who are stepping forward. In just a couple of days ago, as Susie and I were discussing this, the entertainment industry agrees that to actors' demands to stop high-risk meetings and auditions. And high-risk meetings are considered meetings that are taking place in hotel rooms. So, and the Washington Post recently did a poll in which the statistics show that 33 million women have come forward and answered that they have been sexually harassed. 14 million women have come forward to say that they have been sexually harassed in work-related episodes. And 81% of the women who replied to this survey say they have had some experience of sexual harassment. Now, part of what we want to be doing today is getting to talk about how this has entered the consulting room, how our patients are thinking about this, how has Me Too affected consciousness, and are we seeing it more and hearing about it more in the consulting room. But we also obviously want to be thinking about the people in the room and your own experiences, because it's always, you know, a good old women's movement, second wave process was trying to identify the issue that you're talking about in a personal way.